I'm Marcus Smith, and this is Constant Wonder. Join us as we quest for the awe and wonder of knowing we are part of something infinitely larger than ourselves.
About a year ago, I messed up my son's haircut, and so we were headed to Great Clips to fix his haircut. And on the way, we were on a roundabout, and there was a lady holding up a sign that said puppies. And I was like, hey kids, let's stop just to look, but we're not gonna buy one.
You can already guess where this story ends up, and we'll get back to it very quickly. First off, though, this is the voice of Amy Leach, an accomplished author and essayist. Someone who's apparently willing to rat herself out about a fatal haircut she once gave her son, then also confess her inability to refrain from an impulse pet purchase. People who can laugh at themselves are often a hoot to spend time with, so she's got that going for her. The attraction for a podcast like Constant Wonder, however, is that she's eager and willing and excited to take her readers on any number of memorable journeys. A deeply appreciative audience has taken delight in her collections titled Things That Are, the Everybody Ensemble, Donkeys, Essays, and Other Pandemoniums, and her third volume, The Salt of the Universe, Praise, Songs, and Improvisations. If you tag along with Amy, you're likely to summit a few mountain peaks before you even realize it, because of all the compelling conversation. Speaking of mountains, Amy is a writer who takes in the broad view from up high, but also is unusually attentive to things often overlooked as though they were minor or negligible. She's someone who finds what she's looking for, but also says she has learned to look for things she isn't looking for. Now, I know that sounds like a mind bender. Looking for what you're not looking for, according to Amy, might go something like this. You walk into a big box store just for a can of tomatoes, but end up having spent quality time in an appreciation for just about everything there, from candles and whistles to bathtub neck pillows, and who knows what other kind of pillow. Anything and everything may seize the attention of the highly attentive wanderer. In fact, our conversation felt very much like that. Amy and I talked about things easily slighted as peripheral, like playing the tuba or some other instrument, and feeling the magic in that big box store I mentioned. We welcomed detours along the way if they seemed to beckon, which brings us back to the story of Amy's unplanned detour at a roundabout to check out some puppies.
And you can imagine the rest of the story. We got him home, and as soon as we got him home, he fell off our deck and broke his leg and had to have $5,000 surgery, this tiny French Bulldog puppy. And he had digestive issues, and he had swallowed something wrong, and he couldn't breathe. And I thought, oh my word, we have just spent $7,000 on a dead dog. Now, a year later, we are all so in love with him. We cannot live without him. Some of the members of my family are a little bit cynical and cool usually, but when it comes to Linus, my dog, they become just all heart and soul, and sentiment and affection. He has made our lives infinitely better.
Well, Amy, we're just meeting today, and I think it's fair for me to let you know just a little bit about myself so you kind of know where I'm coming from. When I was a young kid, I played the tuba in junior high school, as did you. And maybe we can do some comparative notes on that without actually playing any notes. But sousaphone, technically speaking, because it had to wrap around your body to march. Was yours a sousaphone?
I played both, tuba and sousaphone.
And I'm going to imagine that the sousaphone bell was probably banged up more than the tuba bell. That's the way it typically is, you know.
Oh, it was so banged up, and it was just an irresistible target to throw things, for other people to throw things down it. For example, a football. Somebody threw a football down my sousaphone bell one time.
That's better than a live small animal, you know. Talking tuba was how we got going in this exchange, because I've learned over the years that big, shiny, loud things can be great icebreakers. It turns out that Amy's career as a musician did not actually hinge on any specialization with an outsized brass instrument. It was, in fact, a much smaller instrument that really seized her childhood imagination.
When I was about 7, this German woman drove into town with a van full of violins, little baby violins, and she gave a presentation at my elementary school. I think I was in 2nd grade. I conceived such a crazy obsession that I wanted to play the violin, and I went home and I was just sick with desire. I said to my parents, I have to play the violin. I have to play the violin. And I remember swooning in the back seat, and that's all I could think about. That's all I wanted. The other 2 times that I felt that kind of obsession, the second time was when we were in Chicago and my husband interviewed at a school in Bozeman. And I had never been to Bozeman, but I conceived this insane obsession, this is what I have to do. It's like fate. And the other time was when I wrote my last book. I was like, this is what I was made to do. I was born to write this book. So back to the violin, my parents very kindly conceded to my request and gave me violin lessons, gave me violin. I just practiced all the time. And growing up in the Seventh-Day Adventist Church, the Adventist Church does not normally hire musicians. Musicians are just supposed to, are expected to, serve at church. This means that I played the violin at church from a very unprofessional age. It was great because I was very used to it. I have since been hired in other denominations as a musician where only people with master's degrees play in church and they get paid. But growing up in such a sort of unprofessional situation was wonderful because I got used to playing all the time up front, and those hymns are just part of my bones, part of my organs, part of my blood. So you also grew up playing music in church?
Well, I did, and I remember the trepidation because I was 12. I think you were younger than 12 when you first started doing church music. But I remember so well the day came and they said, you will now accompany this congregation as they sing a hymn. And I at least got to pick the hymn because that way I knew what was within my capacity. Some of those are pretty tough. And I just the fear of falling behind the congregation or not knowing how to catch up, or what if I drop out, or and I finally figured out I could keep the melody going, But that was awful because of the sheer exposure to a congregation that might mock you if they could hear errors, That was tough.
Well, what I found most difficult was switching from song to song because, at home I can just noodle around and improvise on one song. That's kind of what I naturally do. And I also play the piano. So I also was playing the piano at church. But during a religious service, you have, between, 3 and maybe 7 different songs, and switching from one to the other, where the spirit of one is so different from the spirit of the other, it's like switching from dream to dream. It's like trying to all of a sudden stop dreaming this dream and start dreaming another dream. And it's very difficult, but I think also wonderful in just an exercise in versatility, and also, dreaming, switching from dream to dream. And here we go into a different key. Here we go into a different personality, different spirit. It's when it's not extremely stressful, it's very exhilarating.
So I want to go back a little bit here just to what it was that seized you. It's one thing to say I was violently obsessive about the violin, and I had to do that. I remember being maybe 6 or 7 when suddenly, I don't know for what reason, I found myself in front of a rehearsing high school symphony orchestra. I was so mesmerized, and I didn't know if it was the music or the weirdness of seeing stringed instruments with those little shapes like bodies, and it was just the little F holes in the strings and the bows. It was totally new to me. Do you remember what it was that seized upon you that put you in its thrall?
That is such a good question. I mean, that is the question, but I find it completely inexplicable. I'm going to Greece in a couple of weeks, and I'm reading all of these Greek plays, and I'm reading Homer, and it's funny how often people just attribute things to fate. They just attribute things to God. It must have been the god of music who seized me. I think I would find it facile or too easy to chalk it up to anything else. And the thing is, I have tried to expose my own children to all kinds of music, and I wish they were seized by the same demon or god or whatever, and they're just not. And one is seized by basketball and one is seized by animals, and it's inexplicable, I think.
Well, let's stick with it for just a little bit, because if you are going to decline giving the rationale or the argument or the reason that this God acted upon you, maybe I could drill down this far, which is when the God or the muse or the inspiration hit and you were obsessed, and then you participated and learned and got your hands on the violin, do you remember, can you relive whatever the emotions were that came out of the whole thing?
I know that I just wanted to play all the time, and like by my third lesson, I was playing the Star Spangled Banner by ear. I was just like made for the violin and had things in my head that I could express on the violin and only on the violin. I mean, I'm just so grateful to my parents for letting me follow that obsession and having that whole experience. And it has just like I feel like prioritized my whole life ever since I started the violin. I will say on a side note that I was never seized by playing the tuba. I never liked it.
Seizure might be the right word there.
I was never able to express inexpressible things on the tuba. The tuba was always an obligation. I only started playing it as a joke because I was so tiny, and I thought it would be funny if somebody so tiny played such a huge instrument. But then I had the same band teacher for middle school and high school and college, and so he never let me stop playing the tuba.
Until you were how old?
So I played it for like 8 years, but no. 12 years.
That's a lot of tuba.
But it is fascinating. And it is fascinating how one instrument seizes you and another instrument doesn't.
Did you ever play organ, for instance?
Organ is another kind of obligation. I can't imagine an instrument more opposite to the piano than the organ, though you wouldn't think so from the black and white nifty little keys. The organ is something that I have been pressed into in jobs where I have been preceded by genius organists, and people still want to hear the organ, but I'm terrible at it and I can express nothing on it, and it all just feels like pushing buttons. It just feels like a machine. It doesn't feel like an instrument. But on the piano you can do so much with the dynamics and the sustain, and there is just so much feeling available that I never found available on the organ.
So in church, as you're playing the piano, I understand the obligation thing where somebody kind of corners you and you're going to play the tuba, or you're going to do X, Y, or Z. It's just like a job. But there's kind of this weird tightrope walk that I used to walk where I wanted to be experiencing the music and playing the piano, but I was also being serviceable for the other ends of what the church needed. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it comes and goes. And sometimes I'll have dry spells for like 4 months at a time where I never feel it. I am accompanying things, and I think that the spirit is still taking over, but I still don't feel much. But then it comes back and I get swept away, and it's wonderful when it comes and sweeps me away. And then for the rest of the time, I'm, doing the work.
Yeah.
And that's similar to writing too. And I guess to all art, where you can go through the motions and do it passively, do it believably. And then if you're available to the spirit and to being sweepable away, it comes back.
When I've heard you talk about mystery in music and having just sort of not memorized the notes, but improvising at the piano and going from key to key, I'm interested if there's a parallel between the world of mystery and your engagement in improvisation.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I think that was one of the big themes of this latest book. And somebody who read my book was trying to get me to structure it. And that's when I went away and thought. I thought, no, this is improvisation. I'm making it up. Make it up was a note that I wrote to myself while I was writing the book and kind of guided my sensibilities. We're making it up rather than being obedient, to the notes, and not to diss Bach or Liszt. If I could play those notes, what ecstasy. I can't imagine. I just can't play those notes. I am not a fast pianist. I'm not technically very proficient. So part of the reason that I improvise is that I just play the notes that I can play, and I don't play the notes that I can't play. So I am actually jealous of people who can pull that off.
Have you been a transgressive church musician where you don't stay within the bounds of what's expected for the worship service by the institutional voices?
Well, the church that I play at now, it's kind of hard to be transgressive at because they are so open to all kinds of music. So I have played Cyndi Lauper at church, her song Time After Time, which is sort of a song about loyalty and commitment, but from not a very churchy source. And I really like to go crazy with the African-American spirituals, but they're totally into it. So it's hard to be transgressive there. But this last Sunday, it had been raining for about 3 days. And I sometimes forget to prepare an offertory, but we had taken my little Frenchie on a walk in the rain the day before, and my son was singing, "Waddle in the water, Linus." And so all of a sudden, spontaneously, I played Wade in the Water, and there happened to be a drum group there of 4 women who play the drums. And like at the last minute, I said, "Play with me." And so we all played Wade in the Water in honor of the rain and in honor of my Frenchie. And it was super fun.
It sheds a whole new potential light on baptism is what it does.
Yes.
You ever crash and burn while doing church music?
I have been playing in church for so many years. Oh my word. It's like 44 years now that mostly I can pull off. Sometimes like rationally, I look at my fingers and think, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what those black and white things are, but something takes over and I get through it. But one time I was trying to play, what was I trying to play? Oh, We Three Kings of Orient Are, and it wasn't in their hymnal, but I thought, oh, I know it by heart anyway. But I came to like the 3rd line where they sing, "Field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star." And I could not remember that line at all. And I just played a bunch of wrong notes, like for all 5 verses for that line. And I was so mortified because I always thought that my ears and knowing things by heart was pretty infallible. And that was wonderfully, wonderfully humbling.
Oh, that's one of those paradoxes, isn't it? Yeah, the idea that it could be humbling and wonderful all at the same time. You're not just using wonderful there as a superlative, like it was super, super duper humbling. You mean it was good?
It was good. I have a story now.
Well, if you got a story out of it, was it worth it?
Yes. In The Lord of the Rings, there's this little chapter where the hobbits have a really easy time of it, and they're well hosted by elves, and they're well fed, and they're warm, and they get a lot of sleep, and they have a nice time, but Tolkien says something like, well, there's not much to say about good times, so we'll keep moving on to difficulties and challenges. And so, yeah, stories are often worth it. And I guess the other thing that's wonderful about the humbling experience is that it makes you more compassionate when other people crash and burn. I one time had a guest organist who tried and didn't quite succeed to change to a different key for the last verse. And the whole thing sounded like an organ crashing down a mountain. And oh my goodness, I felt so much for him. And I'm like, I feel for you. I've been there.
You tell a story which is so funny to me. I don't remember where you were, at some band or music group performing at the worship service where they just kept saying that their feelings were utterly indescribable. Like they had no words for it. And you took issue with that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it was at a mega church. I think it was Willow Creek outside of Chicago. And this big deal band had like a big deal light show and big deal audience, like thousands of people there. And their songs were all inane. And I can't tell you how many praise songs start with, I just can't think of anything to say. I just don't have words. But, and yes, I did take umbrage with that. And I remember wishing that I didn't understand English so that I didn't have to understand these inane words. I have to say that the book where it came to in the end was all about praise. And I just started, and then once I started, I couldn't stop thinking about all of the different things that I'm grateful for. Praise for butter, praise for bread, praise for rockability of guitars, praise for fermentability of grapes, praise for my parents who let me have free reign at the library and free reign of my backyard and the woods behind my backyard, and had let me have all of the animals that I wanted to in my room.
Yeah, little small things that are mundane. Kind of a contradiction in terms if nothing really is mundane, aside from the fact that the word mundane means on earth. Yesterday I was out in the foothills below a mountain here in Provo called Timpanogos, and I was with my wife and my daughter, and we were doing a little 3-mile loop of a hike. It was just beautiful, late evening. And for years and years, I had not seen a sago lily. I saw one last night. And it's a beautiful, elegant little thing, but its smallness, and it's humble because it's so close to the ground. It's low, it's humble. And I stopped in my tracks.
Yes, praise for sago lilies. It's funny because at that same service where I heard the band who couldn't think of any words, there was a sermon about size. And this guy showed us a slideshow of the universe, and he showed us slides of bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger things. And the upshot was, God is so wonderful that he would condescend to love things as tiny as ourselves. I mean, I guess the upshot was God's a bigwig, humans are weevils, so we should just tremble and be humble and humiliated and feel grateful that God would even notice us. But I wanted to, with my book and with my life, praise little things like sago lilies and babies and fern seeds, which are invisibly small, but turn into beautiful chartreuse little baby ferns. I wish I had thought to jump up on stage and provide an alternative slideshow of showing smaller and smaller and smaller things. And
and you included Ruth Bader Ginsburg in your list, as I recall.
And Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
She was a diminutive of stature there.
She's diminutive. I've been diminutive in my life too, and don't appreciate the value system which only values large things, large people.
There's always a risk that people jump too quickly to the idea that we don't matter or that small things don't matter because there are bigger things. And you beautifully took that on to say, no, what if we went small to see the glory of these phenomena, like sago lilies? I'm just wondering if you open up the parameters of praise to include everything.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't think about this, but when I told my husband the title of my latest book, which is Salt of the Universe. He said, "Oh my goodness, you don't really narrow things down, do you?" There's this word that keeps occurring to me. It's expansionist. I want to be an expansionist at heart. It comes from a description of the father of the blues, W.C. Handy. His biographer says, he is an expansionist at heart. Herman Melville talks about choosing a large subject instead of a small subject. So like choosing a whale instead of a flea or a fly. And when you choose a large subject, it makes you expand to your subject. And I would be an expansionist rather than a shrinkist in my heart.
And yet, in your latest book, Salt of the Universe, there's a passage where you almost bemoan the fact that when we start going out and out into the cosmos and things get bigger and bigger, it's so overwhelming that there's an easier way to be with things our own size or that are relatively small, at least, because who can ever come face to face with everything?
Yeah, I mean, we only have so much, what is it called?
Bandwidth?
Thank you. Bandwidth. I've been trying to write this essay about these Bible verses that say, lift up your eyes, lift up your eyes. And well, Abraham Heschel says nobody sneers at the stars. I think that's one of the wonderful reliefs that the stars offer us. And I think sometimes I would get too irritable and sneery, but then going out to look at the stars, the sneer was gone.
Yeah, the stars somehow evade the human impulse for control, and so people can't really commandeer them and tell us what stars are all about, and then tell us what that means about our own behaviors. We get to be with stars on our own terms.
Yes, and that issue of control, I feel like that has been the theme of my life. And what I'm going for when I get swept away by music or when I get swept away by writing is not being in control anymore. And I feel like my best writing has been in praise of uncontrollability. I mean, it can be very disturbing, but also takes you out of yourself, makes you expand, takes you new places. I feel like that's the theme of my life. And having babies has been altogether a part of that, and adopting Frenchies has been altogether a part of that, and that's what I am looking for in my art, is to be taken beyond myself.
There's something to this idea of expanding and being taken beyond ourselves. And I think it reassuring to know you don't have to be an artist, a writer, or tuba player for it to happen. We all get those moments when the horizon broadens and beckons. Next in this conversation with Amy Leach, we'll be talking about the idea of praise and just how big that idea can be. I'm Marcus Smith, and this is Constant Wonder. I've worked with lots of younger kids, including my own, and I know firsthand the great feeling of finding just the right kind of educational listening for younger folk. We've got a podcast perfectly suited for younger hearts and minds. It's the Constant Wonder Kids podcast. Stories from the original Constant Wonder podcast featured in a way that's totally accessible for children from about kindergarten age until they hit middle school. Many of these episodes are adventure stories out in nature with fascinating people who go out into the wide world to see its wonder and awe. Curious, developing kids love this podcast, as well as the grown-ups who guide and love these kids. True stories about ocean divers, bird scientists, volcanologists, non-experts who rescue animals and rewild and replant damaged habitats. Positive stories about people doing positive things for the world. Would you like to get inside the mind of a bee, or find tiny hummingbird eggs, or go in search of seahorses? Maybe discover amazing ways that some plants can think and communicate. Constant Wonder Kids is perfect for road trips, bedtime listening, maybe just for whenever your brain's got an itch that needs to be scratched. New episodes drop on Mondays. Tune in to Constant Wonder Kids on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. We now return to Constant Wonder. If praise is so important in our lives, and I operate on the premise that praise is incredibly important, the universe does call us to some aspect of praise at some level, whatever form it may take. If that's the case, and if sneering at the stars is not possible, as Abraham Heschel wrote, what does that do to us on a daily basis when we have so much to complain about, and sometimes rightly so? Like we were stuck in the Walmart, for instance, in the 13 below weather, and you shut your car keys into the car, didn't you?
I was locked out of my car, but luckily I had a warm Walmart, and my husband couldn't come pick me up for like 2 hours, so I just walked around Walmart. Before, when I went to Walmart, I had only been looking for the things that I was looking for. For example, pickles or baby socks or whatever. And my beef with Walmart was that they were always out of whatever I was looking for. And so my creed was boo Walmart. But when I had 2 hours just to walk around Walmart, I realized that there were all these things that I hadn't been looking for. And that is another, I feel like, theme or credo of my life, is to try and look for things that you're not looking for in writing, in relationships, in improvisational renditions of songs that go new places. And I'm just trying to run into things that I wasn't searching for.
I found it really interesting that you were so particular to use the preposition for. To look for things that you were not looking for is different from to look at things that you were not looking at, because one of them has a lot of purpose behind it. Mm-hmm. So what's your purpose when you go looking?
Right. I mean, it's yes, it's like an opening up to surprise. I want to be surprised. One time I wrote this satirical essay where I was writing in the voice of pretty narrow-minded critical reviewers reviewing the earth. Like they just didn't get, like, what's the point of porcupines? I mean, there's nothing relevant here about armadillos, etc. And it's like this whole sort of satirical criticism of all of these surprises that don't seem to have any point. And I had so much fun, like, praising in reverse, like all of the nonsense that surrounds us.
I know you like to go birding and bearing, and I don't think you've been crocodiling, but you probably would be fearless enough to do it. There is a way to see, as I did this morning, a bird called a lazuli bunting. And if I shove it in the category and I think, well, this is just another one of those, then I have diminished it in my estimation and my value system that I no longer am hearing it sing. But the song is brand new to that day. I wonder if that's part of the thing.
Yes, I remember going on a safari in Africa, and at first I was so overwhelmed and impressed with is it the ibexes that have the long twirly horns?
That sounds right to me, yes.
But there are so many of them that after a while I was like, I'm just looking right through them, looking for something rarer. I feel like that experience did teach me about this tendency that we have to, like, once we've seen something, then we just look right through it. But we don't have to if we're aware of that.
Yeah. I kind of want to find a way to integrate some of these things. Praise and small things and music in church and the novelty of things and the desire to be surprised. And I think the way to do it is to think about maybe a bird and music and bird song. Maybe the piano has a god, the way you say in your book, or maybe there's an inspiration that comes when you're playing the violin. Is a bird akin to us in being able to channel something powerful that's inspiring for the bird?
Well, I'm into that idea, and it's funny because some birds have such beautiful songs. And then some birds have such homely songs, and some birds have such kind of prehistoric, obnoxious songs. I mean, actually, I love the
sandhill crane.
The sandhill cranes. Yes, I love it. But it's not exactly beautiful. But it's definitely itself. Kierkegaard said something like the task of the self is to become itself. And I feel like birds are just great examples of being so selfie with their singular songs.
There was a moment in your neighborhood when you were all gathered around a big tree. You've related this elsewhere before. This wasn't a bunch of people looking at a bird. Would you paint that scene for us?
It was a black bear. So in the fall, the bears are around our neighborhood. They're looking for berries to fatten up for the winter. And pretty often in the month of October, bears run through our yard. One time I got a text and there was a bear in our tree, and so all the neighbors were down there congregating, and I say we kind of turned into a cult. But bears, unlike other cult leaders, are not coercive.
I've only seen one bear in the wild before, and I barely saw it because it was gone like 2 seconds after I spied it. Mm-hmm. And I want to be able to be looking for what I'm not looking for, and I was not looking for a bear that day, but I didn't know to look for it. And do you get better at looking for things?
Well, I think that art is good training for looking at the world, and looking at the world is good training for art. I don't know, I always think about the book of Job, and Job and his friends are having this very long theological conversation, and Job wants to know the answers. Why am I suffering?
It's one of my favorite passages of all time.
Yes. So Job wants to know why he's suffering. His friends have the deep answer that Job is suffering because he sinned. He maintains that he doesn't. And when God breaks into the conversation, instead of actually answering their questions and settling the argument, all he talks about is donkeys and goats and fish monsters and clouds and hippos and leviathans, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I think that kind of goes back to our theme of looking what you're not looking for. I mean, that is not what Job and his friends were looking for. And often clouds and hippos and goats and donkeys are not what we're looking for, but that's what's there. And to open our eyes to what's beyond our little niggles and nitpickings and routine thoughts is, I feel like, so beautifully demonstrated in that book. I feel like the best expression of my philosophy is found in the book of Job.
Yeah, it's a daunting book to help us all remind ourselves that we're caught up short every day in the face of all that is so miraculous that we've normalized it.
And that is beyond our control. Yeah. All that is beyond our control. I mean, God shifts the whole conversation to things that are beyond our control.
Now, this is really interesting to me because if we're going to be concerned with the beauties and the glories that we should be praising of the created world that are beyond our control, and yet if you are an essayist, which is to attempt something, to try something, your task is to do what that band in Chicago refused to do, which is to find words. And isn't that at some level an attempt to seize upon the things that are seizing us?
Yes. Yes. I mean, again, I think that's the question. At its worst, language, like cliches, cheapen things. At its best, it's music. And again, back to like my priorities being set by my musical experience when I was a kid. I feel like my best readers, okay, well, maybe I should describe my worst readers first. So like I did an MFA, and you're sharing your work with 15 people, and some are kind of like the critics I was satirizing in that piece, where they want everything to like align with their preconceptions and, you know, align with cliches, really. And please make this clearer. Please make this more logical. Please make it more accessible. Not that I don't want to be accessible, but I feel like my best readers have pointed to my most mysterious sentences and said, do more of that. Reach beyond cliche, reach beyond preconception. And not that I want to be completely incoherent, but I feel like music takes priority over sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What I'm trying to get at here with this conversation is that the mystery that you were just referring to is real, and yet I would say that the universe calls upon us to confront it or to engage with it. And words for me are serviceable in that effort as well as music.
Yes. I feel like when it's going well, when I'm writing well, which I haven't been recently. So I can speak to this from both sides. But when it's going well, I feel like, what the heck is happening? I don't know what's happening. What is happening to me? And when it's not going well, I know exactly what's happening. I'm just, doing serviceable work.
And there's no mystery.
No mystery.
Yeah.
I'm just like working out serviceable expressions of ideas that I've had before. And I'm not satisfied with that. If I have any virtue, I think it's that I'm not satisfied with what I've done before. I want to do something new. I want to be taken out. I want to encounter something new and surprising. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I.
The rock that's higher than you as a writer
Yes.
might be Emily Dickinson.
Yes. 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 Yes, absolutely.
Like
She's
a prophet. You've called her a prophet.
Yes.
What is it about Emily Dickinson? Just for somebody who may not have read Emily Dickinson, I want to include everybody. Could you tell them what a person like Emily offers the world and you all these years after her death?
Well, maybe going back to your praise of the sago lilies, she often takes the flowers or birds or plants in her yard and combines the very small with the very cosmic, elevates it to such a level. And I contrast her with the prophet that I was assigned when I was young, who is Ellen White, who was much more into little prohibitions and telling people what to do and what not to do and what to think and what not to think and what to eat and what not to eat and what to drink and what not to drink. As soon as I could, I exchanged her for Emily Dickinson, who never told me that I couldn't eat pepper on my spaghetti or that I couldn't eat pickles.
I think it was in your discussion of Ellen White, who was one of the founders of the Seventh-Day Adventist movement, and then Emily Dickinson. You set this up as pushing versus pulling. And I thought that was very, very useful. You felt pushed by the dogmatism of an Ellen White. You feel pulled by whatever it is that Dickinson is offering.
Yes. Yes, I feel like Ellen White was a pushy little woman pushing people around. And some people want to be pushed around. Great. Go ahead. Let her push you around. That does not appeal to me. Never did. I much prefer to be pulled like the oceans are pulled by the moon. I am so pulled by Emily Dickinson. She says so much in so few words, for one thing. And for another thing, writes in I think her meaning combined with her rhyme and lyrics equal such divine sense. I mean, dogma, it's so interesting, the discussions and conversations I've had after I wrote this book, which, by the way, I was terrified to write.
Why?
Just because my religion was such a huge part of my identity. My next door neighbor read it and she said, yes, dogma is one way of looking at things. And I thought that was so simple, but so perfect. And I feel like Ellen White has one way of looking at things. And then to encounter just all these other writers, Emily Dickinson, Jim Harrison, who I love. He's one of my recent favorite authors who pulls me so much. And again, I'm so grateful to my parents for letting me read whatever I wanted when I was young. And counteracting the dogma I found at church was the freedom I found at home to read widely. That's a huge, huge part of my formation.
I'm very interested in your having used the word divine. Some people will just use that as a superlative, Julia Childs with her best recipes, they're divine, that kind of a thing. They just glibly toss that off. When you use the word divine, you're not being glib at all, I don't think.
No, not at all.
Is there a story of your choosing that would illustrate this word divine?
Maybe I would go back to these 3 times when I have been gripped with desire. I feel like that's beyond me, and wanting to play the violin wasn't something that I, researched and chose to do. I didn't really look into Bozeman before I wanted to move here so bad, and it's like all I could think about all night long, all day long. I could hardly eat. And we moved here, and it is so glorious, this valley surrounded by mountains. Being sort of possessed by this last book, I feel like all of those are encounters with like a force that is not explainable and that is extremely disorienting, but I mean disorienting in the best way, like turning me into a different person. I'm a different person now than before I played the violin. I'm a different person before I moved to Bozeman. I'm a different person before I wrote this book. It's transforming. But I also think, going back to our discussion of little things, it can be, you don't have to just wait to be gripped like 3 times in your life, like like waiting to fall in love. I mean, I think you can also look for, again, what you're not looking for and find the divine in the lilacs in my backyard, or the western tanager who flew through, or the Frenchie that we accidentally adopted. Again, it seems like it's a matter of being open.
Amy Leach's latest collection of writings is titled The Salt of the Universe: Praise, Songs, and Improvisations. If you enjoyed this episode, we would be very glad to have you leave a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This episode was produced by Jess Scoville, with assistance from Haley Harris. Sound design was by Adam Wells. I'm Marcus Smith. Constant Wonder is a production of BYU Radio. Embark on a whimsical journey with The Appleseed and host Sam Payne. It's one of many shows from the BYU Radio family of podcasts. Wrap yourself in captivating stories, expertly woven by talented storytellers. You'll hear live studio audiences taking immense delight in a broad tapestry of tales, some humorous, others poignantly reflective. The Appleseed is always a family-friendly experience. It sparks imagination creative enough to make fiction feel like fact and bring real-life events back to life. The Appleseed. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.